Hello, I'm Dashiani Navanayagam, and welcome to the conversation from the BBC World Service. This is the programme that puts women in the spotlight and allows us to hear the most incredible stories from all around the world. Today, I'm speaking to two women who both work with service dogs. Anki Salander is a dog behaviourist and trainer. She helps people with disabilities to train their own dogs to become certified assistance animals. And Leah Stoll is Greek Canadian. She's a guide dog trainer and co-founder of the Lara Guide Dog School in Greece. Anki and Leah, a very warm welcome to the conversation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very
It's
much.
lovely to be here.
Now, look, I know you both have been doing this for more than 20 years, but Leah, what's the one thing that people always get wrong about working dogs?
I'd say that they don't have enough fun. That's the one thing that I've heard through all the years, that our dogs work a lot and don't have time to enjoy themselves.
And Anki, what about you? Are there any common misconceptions that you found that people have about working dogs?
Like Leah said, people think they just work in and don't have fun.
Mhm.
My experience is that the dog loves to do it for you, and they just love the work they do. They feel proud of themselves.
Yeah.
So it isn't really a case that they're not enjoying it. The work is their enjoyment, I guess.
Yes, absolutely. They really have a glow about them when they know they've done a job really well.
Anki, I wondered if you might tell us what the difference is then between a pet and an assistance dog.
It's a big difference because when you have a pet, you can be more relaxed and you can teach it for fun. But these dogs are superheroes. They do a real work, and they have to be more obedience in a good way. But they need to could be everywhere in the community. They go to the libraries, they go to the healthcare, they go to the supermarkets, but they just must behave at these places.
Leah, the first time you saw a really strong connection in the way that Anki was just describing was with a dog called Sarge. Tell us a bit about him.
I remember my father had trained a guide dog, and his name was Sarge, a German Shepherd, and he was paired together with a blind person in Greece. And that was the first time I witnessed this special bond that we were just talking about, where it wasn't just a dog and a person working together. It was a dog and a person working as a team. Sarge relied on Petro to be able to know where he is and where he would like to go. But what I found most amazing was that Petro relied on Sarge to guide him through traffic and keep him alive, because basically crossing a street when you're blind, a busy city street in Athens, is not a very easy thing, even for somebody who can see. So to be able to cross such a busy street and rely completely on a dog, yeah, like Anke said, they're like superheroes, and I was amazed.
How old were you at the time?
I was 6 years old.
Wow, so you were very young when you witnessed this.
Yes.
What lasting impact do you think it had on you?
I think that was exactly the moment where I knew that this is what I wanted to do myself. I wanted to train dogs to be able to guide blind people. And it just, yeah, it stuck with me my whole life. I'm still doing it now.
Anki, you are nodding away there, and you yourself said dogs are superheroes. In your working life, are there any particular superheroes that stand out to you?
Yeah, it is the first team I've trained. It was a young boy with Down syndrome, and he had a Havanese, a little dog, to his service dog. The goal was to make him interact with other people through the dog. And he has an amazing way with the dog, because he was not so good in speaking language. He said wrong words when he would do a command to the dog, but the dog always knew what he wanted. So if he said say sit, and the lay down or what else. But the dog always did it right. And we were so amazed. We couldn't understand it. And they have such a bond and such a connection. And his parents, the dog didn't obey them very much. But when he took the command, the dog was, it was super behaved. It was full focus, all of that.
That's the connection where you notice that the dog isn't just depending on its person, and the person is not just depending on the dog. There's a codependency.
Yeah.
And that's also the difference between pet dogs, where that connection is more one-sided.
What's really fascinating, though, is not just the ability of dogs in this situation to connect with their owners, but also sometimes to communicate with complete strangers on behalf of their owners. And Anki, I think you had one experience where a dog was able to get help for its owner after she fainted.
Yeah, I trained a woman and her dog, and the dog was going to alert people when she fell. One time she fainted in the street in the middle of a small town, and the dog, he went away from his owner, alerting a strange person in the street, and thought to come here, my owner needs help. So she could go to her help with the ambulance and all of that.
Wow.
And that was, the dog was a superhero.
That is truly incredible. Leah, can any dog be trained as a service dog?
No, I don't think so. In my experience, mainly with guide dogs for people who are blind or deafblind, not all dogs can be trained. They need to have a certain character, a certain body build, and a certain motivation for work, of course. I have two favorite breeds. That would be the German Shepherd and the Giant Poodle. So I might be biased because of my experience with Charge, but I find that they are very focused workers. They're super attentive to their person, and they rely less on outdoor stimuli.
And you train these dogs to become guide dogs. You mentioned there that not all dogs can make good service dogs, and there's certain characteristics they need. How do you go about looking for or testing for those traits in puppies?
In our case with guide dogs, we'll test the puppies at 8 weeks old. They'll go through a number of tests, including how they respond to certain heights or environments that might be tricky for a puppy at that age, which is being placed on the first or second step of stairs, and see what it tries to do, or how it engages with you during play. So, for example, a simple test is if you throw the ball away from yourself and the puppy, if the puppy runs to pick up the ball and even better brings it back to you, that's a really good indication that it's willing to cooperate. Whereas a puppy who might run for the ball and run away, one might just take off a point there.
Yes.
And the one that might not go for the ball at all, well, then, that'll be 2 or 3 points that'll be removed. And we've got sound tests, of course, to see if they're reactive, and touch tests. So a dog or a puppy that doesn't like to be touched or rolled around is not ideal candidate then for guide dog or service dog. I'm guessing, I don't know by Anki, but I can imagine that it's similar.
So Anki, I guess the difference between you and Leah is that Leah is finding the puppies and assessing them for suitability and then training them, but you are training the teams. They come to you, don't they? The owner and their dog come to you, and you've said that you don't actually train the dog. You train the owner.
We train people to train dogs. People used to say that.
How hard is that? I actually wonder, is it harder to train people than it is to train the dog? How trainable are these owners?
Yeah, It's some are very hard to train, and some are very easy. But we found this way because it's a good way because the owner of the dog knows the dog from the beginning. They have all the things from their puppies often. But then, of course, sometimes it's hard to train people because we only train with positive reinforcement,
Yes.
and that is very, very important for us. So they love to work because they were going to do this work for about 6, 7, 8 years of their life.
What skills in particular are you teaching owners?
Yeah, we teach them the obedience so they can go without the leash, and they can stay put, and they can sit down, stay there, or then also special tasks. If it is for diabetes, they learn to how to tell the owner it's a low blood sugar, and also if the epilepsy, we train them to how to show the owner it's a seizure's coming, and we train them to open doors, put on the light buttons and the elevator buttons, or that all everything what the person need. We don't train them for a lot of skills if the person don't want to a lot of skills. Perhaps there are 4 or 5 things that very important.
Lee, I wondered if what's the most challenging thing you've found to teach a dog?
Guide dog training, I'd have to say that teaching them to recognize and navigate high obstacles is probably the most challenging. When they're walking, it's in their nature to look straight ahead or to look down, but it's not at all in their nature to walk looking upwards towards the sky. So that's a challenging type of specific exercise that we have to focus on a lot.
You've said before that food is used as a reward, not a bribe. I'm really
Yes.
interested in that. What do you mean by that, and how do you
Yeah.
use food as a reward and not a bribe?
So we use a system called progressive reinforcement based on the reward system so that the dog has a positive experience carrying out a specific task. For example, you might notice some people, they try to call their dog to come to them and they're holding a treat in their hand. And so dogs are very clever animals, and this is a type of bribe situation. So the dog can see that you've got a treat and you're calling him to come over. And in your mind, you might think you're giving him the treat afterwards or as soon as he comes. But in the dog's mind, his reward is already there.
Right.
And he just needs to get it. And so this is why many times I see it on my daily walks quite often with people here walking their dogs, and they're calling them to come because there's a distraction, but the dog won't come, and then they hold the treat close to the floor or further ahead of them saying, come, come, come. So yeah, this is totally a bribe situation. But with progressive reinforcement, so what we do is we teach the specific task by minimizing the steps as possible. So we'll start by taking the puppy or the young dog, and we'll lure him to do a certain behavior, for example, to come, and then we'll reward him for that. And we'll keep repeating this behavior until we feel that the dog gets it. Then we'll proof to make sure that he really has understood. And if he's understood it, then we'll raise the specifications and we'll raise distraction levels. And we'll just keep building on that system until we get, the desired result that we are looking for.
That makes complete sense, the way you've explained that. And I now see exactly what I've been doing wrong. I completely bribe rather than reward. We've been talking a lot about the bond between the dog and the owners, and how intense and all-consuming and powerful it can be. I wondered, whether there is still a resistance from broader society to service dogs, and whether there are cultural and societal challenges, I guess, that you see, Anki, perhaps in Sweden.
Yeah, we have problems in Sweden because we haven't got a clearly law that say you are welcome everywhere. So many of our teams are rejected accessibility. So that's a problem. That almost it's a fatal when it is young persons, perhaps who have a dog for ADHD or something like that. That's only one time they are. Perhaps they don't go out without a dog because they can't. But when they go out with a dog and they get denied access, they say, I would never do that again. So that's big, unfortunately, things happen all the time. And it's so heartbreaking when young people get this. The older persons who got the service dog, but it's more visual, like you have a wheelchair or what like that. They are more positive for the society than this one, because they see you need a dog. But when you have like diabetes or epilepsy or ADHD, you can't see it, it's invisible. So that's they get question why they have a dog.
Yes, we have that in Greece too. It was actually one of the main reasons that the first guide dog, Sarge and Petro, didn't stay together for very long, because this was a long time ago, 1983, but he could not access any public transport. He couldn't enter any supermarkets. It was very difficult to enter businesses. So in the end, he had a guide dog, but he couldn't use it. So we don't have that level of rejection today. We've worked really, really hard, and all service dogs are able to use public transport in Greece. And they're allowed in businesses, pharmacies, bakeries, but you'll have the individuals that will deny access, and then the guide dog team or the blind person will have to call the school, and we have to start this whole process of reaching out to the business and creating awareness and talking to them about it. So it does happen. It's just not as often as it used to be. We have an issue with the airlines. So for us, that's a tricky part. Many of our guide dog teams are they're active. They like to travel a lot, and airlines have different policies, so that doesn't help. Within the EU, you've got a different policy to what the UK does, for example, or the States. And so it's always a mass project to get them to have their access. They need to book a flight with their guide dog.
Anki, you were nodding away there. How much education and change do you think is still needed to raise awareness around this?
There's still a lot to do, mainly by hospitals, actually.
Oh, in
people
hospitals.
are denied to go to take the dog with them to the hospital, and it's very frustrating for many of them who need the dogs, especially then for diseases that you can't have any other measurement, like Addison. You can't measure the cortisol level. It's only the dog who can tell you if it's good. But people don't understand that the dog is essential. During the hospital, when you are at hospital also. And also some restaurants, they don't want the dog to go inside because they think they will have open food buffet, that the dog will lose hair and there will be dog hair in the food, and they don't understand that the dog will stay at the table, lay down and behave. It's not going to run loose in the restaurants.
Attack the buffet.
Yeah, exactly.
How transformative can dogs be for for people. You see it firsthand. I wondered if you can just explain to everyone listening.
Oh, it's a big difference. We have people to actually go outside the house nowadays because they have the dog. We have people who are confident to be alone at home, for example, because they have the dog to help them. It's a big impact on the person's life, and it's give them more independence.
And Leah, in particular, how do guide dogs empower women?
Oh, we found that to be quite interesting in Greece, especially because it's been for generations sort of the cultural aspect of women being at home and cooking and caring for the family. And when we used to visit schools to see how blind children are taught life skills so that they could be, be part of society. We found out that the skills that they were being taught were very basic, and it wasn't really targeted for them to gain independence. It was more for them to be able to move around their home. So when we began our second program, which is training orientation and mobility skills, we found that women, especially after they got their guide dog, just felt so much more free to be able to travel, which is something that they would not have thought to do before. So yeah.
And I'm very aware that when I started this program, you both said that a common misconception people had about working dogs was that they just worked too much and they didn't enjoy it. But I wanted to discuss, what is retirement like? What does retirement look like for these dogs, and when do they retire?
In our case, our dogs retire at the age of 10. So when they come into their 9th year, we start thinking about the 10th year. And if the guide dog will continue to stay with the blind person, or if we will find a new family for it for the retirement years. Most often, the blind person wants to keep the dog. And that all depends as well on whether they want to have another guide dog and how soon they want to have another guide dog and how long our waiting list is. But we make sure that our guide dogs are retired at the age of 10 so that they can live out the next couple of years of their lives. Without having to walk the very hot streets of Athens.
How does the dog know it's retired? That might sound like a silly question, but I wonder.
It's interesting. It sounds like a question that, might not have an answer, but recently our co-founder's guide dog passed away. And just about a year before she passed away, she had retired her, but was still using the harness for short trips. Because May, that was the name of her guide dog, I'm quite sure had this feeling that it's her duty to help out Ana Maria, our co-founder. And the very amazing thing was that as soon as Ana Maria brought into her home Babu, which is the guide dog she has now, and it was just trial period, we just saw, she called me one morning and said, I don't know, but you won't believe it, but May has just laid next to Babu, and when I called the dogs to take them out, she picked up her harness and she dropped it, not in front of me, but in front of Babu.
So she knew.
She was like, here, it's your turn.
That is a fantastic story.
Yeah.
I mean, I have one dog, but he's very much my first dog, and I've never had a dog before. And one of the things that I have at the back of my mind is is just, I know the sadness that will come when he does
Mhm.
eventually go. And when I listen to both of you talk about the incredible bonds you have with dogs and that you've witnessed as well, I wondered if you had any advice about how you manage that grief when you have a relationship like this.
At our school, we call it a support group for guide dog users who have, yeah, been in a situation where they've just lost their guide dog. It's important to have that, I feel, to be able to have people to talk to about it. And we have a sort of a guide, if you could call it that, with a few things that they could do. So, for example, Anna Maria, in her case, when she lost May, she went on to organize a small funeral ceremony. That was really beautiful. So we each brought something special that we had from May, and we she had a special song for her that she liked, and she had written something for her. So this really helped her find some closure and be able to, yeah, be as open as possible to the new guide dog that she got later on.
Anki, what about you? Do you have any advice around this?
I think it's very, very important that you actually grieve and you talk with people and get understanding, because this is not only like a little pet. People who don't have dogs or animals, they don't understand it sometimes, the bond you have. But it's like sad, like losing a relative.
And finally, I wondered if I could ask both of you if you had any tips for your average dog owner. So people who have dogs that are not necessarily superheroes, but maybe superheroes in their own homes. What are the hacks that people can do to increase that bond between them and their pet?
I would say to find a hobby that you enjoy together. So it could be anything. It could be swimming, it could be biking, it could be hiking, or maybe playing frisbee. So depending on your type as a person and your dog, to find something that you can spend quality time with every day, that builds a strong connection.
It's very important to, like Lisa say, you have to get fun with the dogs. It creates a big bond together when you do things. Feel free to do what you both like. Find out that.
That's great advice. Anki and Leah, thank you so much for joining us on the conversation.
Thank you for
Thank
having
you.
us,
Yeah,
Jane.
thank you for having us.
Thanks for listening to the conversation from the BBC World Service. If you like our episodes, do like and subscribe to our YouTube channel.